All right, welcome. Thank you guys for attending this regular city council meeting. As such, all the rules of decorum are in force. All right, with that, I call this meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. Please stand for the pledges. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Please be seated. All right. City Secretary, we have a quorum this evening with all council members present and in attendance. Proof of notice of meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. This meeting was posted by 2 p.m. on November 1st.
Any public comments?
No, we do not.
All right, moving on to public hearings. If you're here to speak on one of the public hearings, after it is read, you'll be called to come up. Be sure to state your name, your ward, and you'll have 3 minutes. Council cannot respond to you during the public hearing portion. City Secretary, public hearings are starting at 5:31 p.m. Public hearing A, to obtain citizen views and comments regarding replat 2024-11-01 and application for replat, which will allow the applicant Family Crisis Center of the Big Bend to reflect the updated ownership of a recently purchased unimproved alleyway on the subject property. The subject property is located at 402 East Gallego Avenue and is legally described as lots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in the alley block 71 of the original town of Alpine. The property owner of record is Family Crisis Center of the Big Bend Incorporated. The parcel ID of the subject property is 12236. The current zoning classification of the property is R2, two-family district. If the replat is approved, the zoning classification of the subject property will be R2, two-family district. Is there anyone here to speak on this? Seeing none, public hearing B, to obtain citizen views and comments regarding special use permit 2024-11-01, an application for special use permit to allow the applicant Benjamin Garcia as a tenant through an existing license or permit, Brews and Hughes, BG Wine and Malt Beverage retailer's permit to provide beer and wine sales at the subject property for a newly established business, Viva Cow Dog and Cafe. The subject property is located at 215 East Holland Avenue. The property owner of record is Jason Sullivan. The parcel ID of the subject property is 11798. Is there anyone here to speak on this public hearing? Seeing none, we're moving to public hearing C. City Secretary, would you read that? I need to drink some
Sure.
water.
Public hearing C is public hearing to obtain citizen views and comments regarding variance 2024-11-01. An application for variance which would allow the applicant Need Fang Lee and Ziudan Lin, care of Carol Morrow, to establish a variance to the setback requirements of the subject property. The acceptable setback is typically 12.5 feet from a structure to the property line. This variance would allow the subject property 0 feet of setback from the structure to the property line, which typically does not meet the requirements for a residential corner under the city's code. The subject property is located at 513 North 16th Street and is legally described as Lot 7 and 8, Block 8, Hamilton addition to Alpine, as shown on subdivision plat files and envelopes B6 and B7, plat records of Brewster County, Texas. The property owner of record is Li Feng and Ziudan Lin. The parcel ID of the subject property is 10625. The current zoning classification of the property is R2, two-family district. If the variance is approved, the zoning classification of the subject property will be R2, two-family district.
Is there anyone here to speak on behalf of this? Okay, seeing none, I'm closing public hearings at 5:34 p.m. City Secretary. All right, public presentations and recognitions. There are none this evening. We do have a proclamation of Municipal Courts Week, November 4th through 8th, 2024. Is there anyone here to accept this proclamation? Please come forward. Hey, in recognition of Municipal Court Week, whereas municipal courts play a significant role in preserving public safety and promoting quality of life in Texas, And whereas more people come in contact with municipal courts than all other Texas courts combined, and public impression of the Texas judicial system is largely dependent upon the public's experience in municipal court. And whereas state law authorizes a municipality to either appoint or elect a municipal court judge for a term of office. The Alpine Municipal Court is a state court and its judges are members of the state judiciary. And whereas the procedures for the municipal court operations are set forth in the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure and other laws of the state of Texas. And whereas the city of Alpine is committed to the notion that our legal system is based on the principle that an independent, fair, and competent judiciary will interpret and apply the laws that govern us, and the judges and court personnel should comply with the law and act in a manner that promotes public confidence in the integrity and impartiality of the judiciary. And whereas Alpine municipal judges are not policymakers for the city of Alpine, but are bound by the law and the canons of judicial conduct and are required to make decisions independent of the governing body of the city council, city officials, and employees. And whereas the city council recognizes that the Constitution and laws of the state of Texas contain procedural safeguards in criminal cases for all defendants, including indigent defendants, and supports the Alpine Municipal Court in complying with such legal requirements. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed the week of November 4th to 8th, 2024 be designated Municipal Court Week in Alpine, Texas, in recognition of the fair and impartial justice offered to our citizens by the Alpine Municipal Court, in witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand this 5th day of November in the year 2024.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, moving on to community interest items, city secretary, each member gets 1 minute on the clock. Starting with the mayor's announcements, I wanted to announce that December 7th, the Alpine Historic Association will have its 3rd annual Christmas stroll. This year it'll be a little bit different. It's gonna start from the churches around the Methodist Church, and then it's gonna move to the courthouse, and it will start at 6 p.m. once again on December 7th. City manager, 1 minute.
Just a friendly reminder that we have Art Walk November 22nd through the 24th. And this Saturday, November 9th, we are having a one-day hiring event at the Civic Center from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. The idea is to have the residents or interested parties come in and actually fill out the application there, actually interview there, and the departments have the opportunity to hire on the spot. We have positions in utilities, streets, gas, airport, police department, and administration. So we're looking for a 9 to 2 p.m. day full of fun.
All right, thank you. And people have been asking about that in the community, by the way. Okay, and Councilmember Stevens?
All I have is I just want to compliment the city for the tree giveaway last weekend. Really well attended. And it was nice to see everyone pick up trees.
250 trees were given out.
Outstanding. Yeah,
Awesome.
and Lena did a great job.
Councilmember Escobedo? Councilmember Nance?
No comment.
Councilmember Martinez?
No comment.
Councilmember Stone? Okay, all right, so moving on to changes to the posted agenda. Are there any items to be continued or withdrawn? Okay, are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda for separate discussion?
Oh, go ahead. I'd like to remove item A.
Item A. Okay, Councilmember Stone?
Remove item B, please.
D is in dog?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, City Secretary, we have removed item A and item D. Okay. Are there any action items to be added to the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none. Are there any time-sensitive items? Okay, seeing none. All right, so there were no time sensitive items. Consent agenda, city secretary, remember we have removed items A and D.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight's consent agenda now contains 2 items: approval of appointment of Mateo Mears to the Place 4 position on the Music Advisory Board, and approval of resolution 2024-11-01, a resolution approving the City of Alpine credit card policy.
I need a motion.
So moved.
I need a second.
Aye.
Let's vote.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
City secretary, all council members voted unanimously to approve consent agenda items B and C. Okay, moving on to items removed from the consent agenda. Councilmember Nance, you removed A.
Yes, on that, as just, we needed one correction on page 40, the city staff and stakeholders present. We had Alessandra Gadd still listed as the city attorney, and I believe it was Cynthia Trevino last time.
Okay.
So just to make that amendment and. Yeah. I need to make a motion on that one.
Yes, please.
I'll make a motion that we approve minutes with the amendment that we remove Alessandra Gadd and add Cynthia Trevino as the city attorney.
I need a second.
Second.
Okay, let's vote.
Aye.
Aye.
City secretary, item A, to remove Alexander Gadd and add Cynthia Trevino to the minutes was approved unanimously with all council members voting in favor. All right, moving on to item D, Councilmember Stone.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to ask a quick question as I was glancing over Senate Bill 1893. I don't believe it says official related business in the bill, and I could be wrong, but I just want to make sure that we're not stomping on our feet, noting it is a very popular application, and it could be used for like tourism or other things as long as someone used a different phone. I know that the bill is saying we can't put it on city devices, but I just wanted to make sure and ask a question if those official related business, we don't want to step on our feet and not allow, Heather or Chris to be able to create a TikTok account for tourism, should that be helpful.
City manager,
I think you need a motion before you can have discussion.
make a motion, please.
Make a motion to remove official related business from item D.
Okay, I need a second. Okay, no second, the motion dies. Let's move on to approve item D. I need a motion.
I'll move to approve item D.
I need a second.
My second.
Let's vote.
Okay.
Aye.
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 City secretary, item D is adopted with 4 members voting in favor, 1 member voting against. Councilmember Stone voted against, Councilmember Martinez, Nance, Escobedo, and Stevens voted for. All right, moving on to reports and presentations. There are none. Let's move on to information and discussion items. Councilmember Nance.
So item 11A.
Yes.
Perfect. So I brought this up to discuss EdLink 18, the 2 gentlemen here in the crowd. I guess what I really wanted to kind of mention to the council is to explain what a MSP, managed service provider, is, what they do to kind of provide that vocabulary in there, and the value they can provide an entity like a municipal government. So I guess that's the 2 gentlemen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just announce into the microphone who you are.
Good evening, I'm Casey Ritchie with Region 18 Education Service Center out of Midland. I'm the Chief Technology Officer. I also represent the EdLink 18 Technology Consortium, which acts as an agency to provide managed technology services to the school districts and other local government agencies. So I guess, Darren, are we just kind of talking about like what is an MSP, or I guess kind of.
Oh, yeah, like what a managed service provider is and the services they would actually provide a municipal government.
So an MSP, and specifically EdLink 18, we are kind of a specialized MSP. So an MSP is an organization that helps other organizations manage their technology, basically. So with a lot of our school districts, we help manage things like manage their servers, manage their desktops, licensing, things like that. When I talk about manage, I talk about making sure that the computers are kept up to date with Windows updates, software updates, keeping the network secure, making sure that, firewalls are managed, network devices are maintained and kept up to date.
And I might even mention, just to tie back in, the question about TikTok a second ago, that is a requirement for government agencies now and I believe ESCs, which are educational service centers, but not K-12 education. So that is a topic they've had to deal with.
That is correct. So as part of that bill, it was explicitly listed, state agencies and other agencies had to comply with it. They also said service centers explicitly had to comply with it. So we also had to come up with a policy, a written policy and a managed policy to actually manage our devices to, restrict TikTok at our organization. That's correct.
And then just to open the conversation up and discussion up, I might open it up to Megan so she could just kind of describe the technology situation the city's in right now, how it's managed, a couple of those things. And then where I kind of envision something like this would be a managed service provider filling in the gaps for the city. Because from a K-12 organization, we're getting more and more cybersecurity compliances issues that we have to do. Our school board members have to take an annual, we have to take an annual cybersecurity thing. So just the mandates from the state are only going to increase on the technology side.
So actually, thank you, Counselor Nance. I'd actually had the conversation with Counselor Nance, and Gio has had a conversation with me, and we were lucky to be able to reach out to them to have a conversation. The city of Alpine is really suffering when it comes to IT management. We don't have anyone internally. We do rely on outside vendors on their schedule. Prime example, when we have an issue with a computer, they reach out to Gio, they reach out to me, they try to do it themselves. It makes it really hard to actually be productive when did I just say yes to something I shouldn't have? Or my favorite is I need a new computer, but we don't have Microsoft. So then I have currently 5 different subscriptions to Microsoft that have to be monitored, that are an act of Congress to get rid of. We've been paying on one for years after the individual has left because we can't cancel it. The other thing is actually knowing what's all being connected to our network. I have had the pleasure of attending a lot of cybersecurity training because of the introduction of AI. Artificial intelligence is up and coming, and it's a huge impact on the financial world. Because if we don't pay attention, we do things that aren't correct. Oh, well, I processed this payment and we don't even know who that vendor is. We have not done that at the city of Alpine. The nice thing about the service managed provider for us, and what I'm looking at from a long-term perspective, is we have computers that get turned over. We have laptops that rotate. I'm currently sitting on 5 laptops that are good laptops, not old. We can't get into them. Employees get terminated, employees quit, they're passworded. We have one laptop that was what we call jailbroken, because the third-party vendor just went in and figured out how to get into it. But now, of course, it's limited to what it can do because it wasn't, done correctly. So having this third party come in will help us as an administrative. They can regulate what is on these laptops. And if someone leaves, we're not like, okay, how do we track them down and get a password? They can log in as an administrator, reset it up for us so that we don't have to worry about it. Microsoft Office is a big thing. Like I said, we have so many different subscriptions to it. And then people forget. Oh yeah, I got this subscription, a year ago, and now I need the invoice for the renewal because from a financial audit perspective, we have to have that documentation. Oh, I don't remember what my password is to get into the Microsoft because I don't use it. And, oh, well, I just got this laptop, but there's not Microsoft, but I want to get it. So I'm going to add another subscription. Having someone actually purchase the subscription for the city as a whole means that it does not matter what computer, we have a subscription for it. It's also looking at our network. Currently BBT monitors our network. Not something they wanted to do long-term. They've just been very gracious in continuing it. But then it's having to go back to them and, okay, how do we whitelist? How do we, I call it blacklist. I think that's not the technical term, but what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And making sure that, we don't have anything coming in that we shouldn't be having in, or having stuff on our network that shouldn't be there. We have the free networks, when you go to the Civic Center, you can log into the free side, but then we have password protected networks, which is what everyone in the city sits on. That's our accounting software. That's our utility software. That's our court software. Everything's tied to that one. And over the years, everyone just gave out passwords. So we don't always know day to day who's even on our network. So having someone who could come in and be like, hey, this isn't acceptable, or hey, this isn't a city issued device. These are all the IP addresses that should be connected. What is this one? And to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, my monitor is black. My answer right now has been, did you turn it on? Did we push the power button? Is it plugged in? And we walk through those questions. But this would also be able to provide really some ease on staff with what is going on with our software. I know one of the things that we talked about is it'd be great to know our inventory. We try to keep up with our inventory because they're not assets. It's considered an inventory because of the cost of the computers. It doesn't meet that threshold. But having the ability to know, hey, did you know you have 42 laptops? When we know we don't, how do we get that all cleaned up? And then saying, okay, these can all be on your network and these can't. So having a third party come in and actually kind of help us assess where we're at and the direction we want to go with our IT, I think would be really helpful. I know that they do work on the law enforcement side, so they understand the restrictions and confidentiality, because I know that would be a question that Chief would have, is, not everyone can access the police department software and have that capability. Helping to regulate what can and can't be on a network, accessing to certain websites. I mean, as of right now, I won't do it, make it very clear, but I can look up anything on my computer. It can be pornography, it can be how to build a bomb, it can literally be anything. Having someone to help us control some of that access will help.
So is this something that you guys could do, everything that she said?
Yes, these are all things that we help school districts and other agencies do. That's exactly why we exist. And that's kind of why we put together the service that we have. Speaking to some of the things that you just talked about, helping you, establish an inventory and track your computers and your software. These are all very common problems that, that we've kind of learned how to specialize in. One of the things that I do want to, make sure is very clear that everything that we do in an open format, in the sense that we share everything that we do with you. We don't just do it in a way that we want to lock you in so that you have to rely on us. Everything we do, all the documentation that we create, we share with you. We assume that you own that documentation because we're a public agency also. So, we're not here to lock you in anything. We're just here to improve your process and make you better. But, everything you said are all very common issues that we would deal with, especially small school districts, that have a lot of turnover with technology directors. So these are all very common problems.
So you're down in Alpine.
So we're actually
Fairly
based out of Midland.
Uh-huh.
So the majority of the work we would do would be remote, but we have people that come to the area all the time. So coming on site is not a problem for us. It wasn't a problem for us to drive down today. So, and we have a great relationship with Big Bend Telephone. So,
Good.
I work with them a lot. So they're the provider to the majority of our schools, in the Big Bend area. So I would consider them a partner that we would work very close with. So this would not be like a hostile takeover of.
Right.
So.
What is the approximate cost of something like this?
So the proposal we worked up for the city of Alpine was about 38,450. It's not the exact number, but it was about 38,450. So.
Annually?
Yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
So one thing that I do want to make sure that is clear that is for our service. There's still going to be other, cost involved. The licensing that you're talking about.
Right.
So there's going to be other licensing. A lot of the stuff are not things that we're authorized to resell. So we would bring in other, companies that you would buy that through. So this is not additional services that we're trying to sell,
Right.
but these are things that we would bring to your attention to say, this is the proper way to, address that concern. This is the type of licensing that you need. So we would review that to make sure that whoever you do buy that from, you're buying the correct license, that type of things.
And that's been one of the issues when it comes to licensing and why we have all the different subscriptions or they bought it. Adobe's a hard one to work with. Everyone has different versions of Adobe. When you buy Adobe or you subscribe to Adobe, you get more than one license. So ideally it should be on multiple computers, but some people don't do that. They just I want a license for each employee, which adds up. It's more and more expense. Microsoft Office, some computers have it, some don't. Some have the older version, some have a newer version. Norton antivirus or any of the security has really just always been left up to the departments. So some of these computers don't even have an outside protection. They have the knowledge and the resource to be able to, hey, here's some options.
Councilmember Martinez?
I think it's a great idea. So I think we have great help addition to the city.
Councilmember Escobedo?
I agree, that's needed, especially during these times with so many hacks.
Councilmember Stone?
Yeah, this all looks really good. Appreciate you, Darren, for bringing this up. Councilmember Nance, appreciate that. And thank you for being here and coming down. My dad was actually retired out of Region 20. He was the
I was
CFO
just
there
at Region 20 a couple of weeks
for
ago.
20 years. Yeah. So you might know Mr. Stone there too. But and I know that y'all are public-private kind of in a weird kind of way.
Kind of fit in
a
between.
good way. Yeah.
We're not private, but we're kind of fit in between a state organization and a local organization.
Sure.
So it depends on the law and when the legislature decides we're state versus when we're local.
Yeah.
So we are a public organization from that sense. But one thing I will, like our department, the Edmond 18 department is 100% self-funded. So we are funded only by the fees that we charge. We don't get any state supported fundings.
Yeah, and so that's, you kind of worked into where I'm going, and of course, there's, profit and so forth as well in this, I've seen kind of these contractors work through the state, different models that they have. But the point that I guess I'm nailing at is that it seems like you would have competitive vendor pricing. I don't know anywhere you can get an IT person for $38,000 either. I'm guessing
Agreed.
both of those.
Yeah, that's exactly our
Yeah.
model. Our model is to come in and help, whether it's school districts or other organizations, to say, we want to come in and help you at lower than the cost of you having another FTE on staff.
Yeah.
Or even if you did have an FTE on staff for technology, we want to supplement that person to prevent you from having to hire more.
Sure.
So, generally, we want to be the force multiplier to help you, achieve more with the resources that you have rather than having to expend more resources.
Sure.
That's our goal.
And I think this is probably the model we need to go with right now. I will say that I'm always a proponent of hiring someone locally, because then you get another staff member, you get another person here, you get another family typically too, but it really looks like, we're just not set up at that level yet, but appreciate y'all being here again.
Absolutely.
Thank
And
you,
I want to
guys.
say, I fully agree with your statement there. That's why we work with as many local vendors as possible.
Sure.
Councilmember Stevens?
Megan, do you need any approval from us just to go do it?
Because of the price limit, I don't need it, and based on the current budget, I can pull it out a little bit from each of the departments without significantly impacting them. And overall, it would be helpful.
I presume you're just gonna go do it. Thanks. Thank you, Darren.
Are you in favor?
No, just definitely.
Okay, in favor?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you, Darren.
all right, thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for
Thank
dropping
you
down.
very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
This is Ronnie Golson.
Yes, Ronnie Golson, Deputy Director, and just listening to your conversation, not wanting to make it go longer, but having been a superintendent of small school out in the rural area, you don't always have just an ants on staff, but can you get one? You're in good shape, but even with them, the vetting of the vendors, as she was saying, all the different things, a lot of times we work with a lot of vendors, so we can get better pricing for you than going off on your own and things like that. So, and then of course, as I think as a superintendent and a deputy director now, red flags when you talk about people leaving the organization and not having a way. We make a joke about, you want to know, Casey will know everybody who's terminated before anybody else. Your email no longer works, you can't get your computer. But
Yeah.
those are safeguards, especially when you have quality infrastructure and things like that.
Okay.
I would encourage.
Okay,
Thank you all for your
Thank you.
time.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Okay, information discussion item B, Councilmember Stone.
So moving on to political signs, I kind of started talking about this last meeting and we weren't able to put it onto the agenda, but as many of y'all know, we have a sign ordinance that perhaps might be out of date at best, or as well as kind of contradicting maybe some other issues, especially the fee that's associated with political signs. I'm not looking at a huge revamp or that, other than just, being able to voice some talking points here, and we can even bring this back for another discussion further in the month if we want to, but just want to see I also want to be able to get some more info to Geo. But noting that political signs, they cannot be, according to state law, looking at chapter 259, that is political signs and state code. They can't be regulated at all on private property. I think we mostly know that. Further, the only regulations on those private properties are pretty small regulations like size or how many signs you can put there. Typically, that's neighborhood associations. And then as far as political signage on any public property, we can't be charging fees for that as well. And currently, we do charge fees right now. And I will say that we don't charge a fee.
The ordinance says we charge a fee.
Yes,
And it
But
was a
we
discussion
haven't.
before, but we have not.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we need to just clean that up is more the idea, and just wanted to be able to voice any, if anybody has any talking points, and we can start working on that more.
So it is still in our ordinance, but we haven't,
Yeah,
because I haven't paid.
oh, I didn't pay it either, yeah.
So, and actually Gio had done some research and he has provided a copy of the city of Dallas's.
Sure.
If council's okay, I know Gio and I have talked about it for some time, actually. The little ordinances that just need to be cleaned up, not major legal considerations. We can move forward with getting that cleaned up and get it on an agenda so that we can have that ready sooner than later.
Yes, please do. In agreement, Councilmember Stevens?
So to just clean up the ordinance?
Mhm. Okay, well,
Thank
of
you.
course, yes.
I hope it was short and
Okay,
sweet,
great.
yeah.
That
moving
was
on.
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to action item C, discussion regarding a possible error that needs to be corrected in ordinance 2024-08-01 and ordinance implementing restrictions regarding non-contiguous zoning or spot zoning. This one is mine. The directors, Megan has had great foresight in having the directors go through and look at their ordinances that pertain to their department. And we have Rob here this evening. We also have Jessica here this evening. And as they were reviewing, they wanted clarification on a particular ordinance that went through. And after reviewing the minutes and tapes, it appeared that there was an error that went through instead of the actual ordinance. But Rob and Jessica, if you'd come on up and tell the council what you have. And thank you for being here. I know it's. And thank you for going through all your ordinances with such diligence and bringing it to council just to clarify for transparency purposes.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So like the mayor was saying, the way this got brought up to our attention is that we were going through the zoning ordinance under the direction of the planning and zoning committee. And as I was wrapping it up, I got to the point to where we had came to this ordinance in May. And it hadn't been codified yet, so I just wanted to put the exact wording that was passed into the ordinance, so we didn't have to review it again and redo everything. And as I was going through it, I was reading it and I was like, I don't remember it being discussed that way, and so it started this whole enchilada. Yeah, a can of worms, I guess, or a rabbit hole that I went down. And so I went to the ordinance in May of 20.
And this information Rob has included in your packets.
Yeah. The May of 21 agenda item, and then also went through the video to watch it, because you'll notice that what was presented in the May of 21 isn't what came. It was a completely different ordinance. And so I guess I was told that I'm looking at it wrong, and I very well could be. However, regardless if I am, there's still errors in here. And I just would like, what was y'all's intent to be made? Because very clear. And I want to be careful because I'm not coming at anybody with like malicious intent or trying to accuse anybody of anything by any means. I just want to make sure that what y'all are voting for is exactly what's getting put through, because I'm in Ward 3. So Darren Nance, you're my representative. And so my vote goes through him by voting him. And so we know how the process works. And so I just want to make sure that it's clear and nothing was done in error. And so in reviewing it, Councilmember Stevens had presented to make an amendment to what was presented there. And
So I'm a little slower. I have no idea what we're talking about. Could we get what we're talking about that needs to change, so I at least have a reference?
well, I don't know that it needs to change. I just want
Okay.
clarification, right?
It's fine, okay.
And so,
Maybe
and
Rob, if you read what you have where it says approve, on that first page, so that council,
Take us to where you're going.
the
yeah,
synopsis of the May 21.
yeah.
Okay.
uh-huh.
So in
Thank
May
you.
of 21, we had an ordinance that was presented through P and Z to y'all. And so it said approve the first reading of the ordinance 2024 TAC 0505. And an ordinance amending Appendix C zoning to the Alpine Code of Ordinance, removing the provision that provides the ability for city council or the planning and zoning commission to initiate a spot zone or non-contiguous zoning designation, amending the application fee from $250 to $350.
And then you said you came in and gave a presentation as to why
Well, we.
y'all thought that was important.
Right, we did. And so the chair discussed what he thought was his importance. Councilmember Martinez, because she was on the P and Z at the time, also noted hers. And then we also noted ours, that it was just because the process was kind of being bypassed and people were skipping their payment by going through their council member and stuff. If y'all remember this whole, it took like 45 minutes of our time. And
Yeah.
I really don't want it to take too much more of ours. I'm sorry to be bringing it back up. And so, Councilmember Stevens approved to, approve the ordinance as presented with 2 amendments, and that was the 4 criteria from the Supreme Court decision regarding what those guidelines needed to be, and also that it needed to be in compliance with our comprehensive plan. And it was passed a 3-2 vote. Councilmember Stone, seemed like you were a little on the ropes with where you were wanting to go, but you voted for. Councilmember Martinez voted for. Councilmember Nance voted against, as well as Councilmember Escobedo. And then obviously Councilmember Stevens approved it as well. And then it went to the Planning and Zoning Committee. I'm sorry. You'll also notice that in May of 21, our minutes that I have here and provided y'all, it'll also state exactly what I said, that it was approved as presented and that those 2 minutes were to be added to the ordinance. However, when we get to June 24th, you'll see that the action item is action item A, states approve an updated recommendation to the city council to approve the ordinance amending Appendix C zoning to the Code of Ordinance, removing the provision that provides the ability for city council and the planning and zoning commission to initiate a spot zone or non-contiguous zoning designation, amending the application fee from $250 to $350. And so that's where I stopped. I'm sorry, I don't have time to like go through the 200 to 300, 400 page packets that we have through. So I just looked at the agenda. This pertains to me. It's the same as what was discussed at the planning and zoning. So I didn't look into the actual packet. However, when you look into the actual packet, you'll see that it was the ordinance that was presented. However, item B under section 2102, initiate by the council or the planning and zoning commission, is not striked out to be removed based off of the minutes in the 21 meeting, as well as the agenda item under action items states that that should be struck out, right? And then you'll also go into our August 6th meeting where under action items, it states the same thing, except for it now says zoning or amending Appendix C zoning to remove the provision that provides the ability for the city council and planning and zoning commission to initiate a spot zone or non-contiguous zoning designation with exemptions. So that was added in there, amending the application fee to $250 to $350, which is exactly what was decided on in that council meeting from my understanding and from what the agenda or the minutes state as well. However, you go into the actual packet, which once again, I'll admit, I did not. I was at the vote conference. I saw that the agenda item states that it was exactly what I recall was discussed at that council meeting. So I didn't go through the packet. But going through the packet, it has the same error under section 21.02. where B is not struck out, initiated by the council or planning and zoning commission. And then it's also the same exact thing for August 20th. So. Yeah,
Okay, so your
Okay.
question to council is,
clarification, like,
did they want it
Right.
struck out that city council and commissioners could not initiate spot zoning?
Right.
Making it have to come to you. So you wanted clarification on what council wanted, is that correct? Okay, and Councilmember Stone, you asked to be recognized.
I think you hit it right on the point there. It was the question, and I'm gonna say it one more time so that I understand it too, but it's the question if it just goes straight to you or if we wanted it. And if I remember correctly, we were trying to just send it to him.
Yeah.
It was, at least that's the way the votes went at that time. So.
Yes. Okay, Councilmember Martinez?
Thank you for the clarification. You know, there are so many up and downs and not agrees many times with the planning and zoning, so I appreciate you pay attention and all this and I would be glad to clarify that and work with you because you are who is in the field, not us. So you have to face it all that. So thank you for that clarification.
Councilmember Nance?
In my perspective, like, I don't want council, P and Z, I don't know, but I don't want council to lose the ability to do a spot zone. I think in rare and extraordinary cases, that might actually be needed, but that should totally go through the process of starting with you guys. And then, because I think at that last meeting too, I said, you want to go talk to the people that know what's going on, and that conversation is going to start with y'all as opposed to us.
Mhm.
So I think it's just, from my perspective, it shouldn't be a thing where all those zones initially come to us because they know we're just gonna fact track it or we're gonna be something else. They all need to start with you guys and go through that process, starting with you, moving to the P and Z, then moving up towards us.
Right.
But I don't want to lose the ability to actually.
no, and so in the time that we spent talking to you, nowhere are we taking that ability from you.
Right.
No.
Or was that our intent? And you can go to the minutes and listen to, or to the video and listen to our conversation. The only thing it was gonna do was going to change that y'all couldn't initiate it, but it's still going to P and Z and it's still going to y'all to be voted on. So like, from my understanding, the way the ordinance should be is that it's gonna say that A, C0 as a buffer zone only between residential and commercial use as its intended purpose. B, in alignment with the Texas Supreme Court established guidelines. C, as outlined in the city's comprehensive plan. So that's what would be, what I believe Councilmember Stevens was trying to make sure is that it was clear in the ordinance when it gets to y'all, that's what it has to meet before it was passed.
Which page was that? So I can read page number?
Any of them.
Oh, gotcha.
So I was just reading off of the random one. This is the
Page
August
114
6th.
back.
114.
Yeah.
Councilmember Escobedo?
I know, I agree. Now it's a little bit more clear because I thought before it was like what you were saying, that we were just.
Right.
But yeah, no, I believe it. And I always thought it was always started with the building officials, the planning and zoning, and then council.
Mhm.
I had never seen it change before that.
Right, yeah.
Councilmember Stevens?
I'm saying, well, it goes to you first and eventually comes up to us.
City Manager?
Oh,
sorry.
Come on.
Sorry.
And if one of my constituents says, hey, I want to rezone, my reaction is, go see the building officials, get the process going. Get a budget board. So that's why we have planning and zoning.
This actually ties in perfect to the next information discussion item. I think it's an internal procedure, which is why we're trying to get standard operating procedures in place and administrative directors directives that the way it's written is you can do it, but you can't bypass the procedures for the department in the city that says you have to start here. They can deny it. It can go to the next step. But yes, the intent was always to go through building services, because the other side of it was, why wasn't a council member gonna pay the fee? We didn't want to skip the fee, so then it becomes an SOP.
Yeah, because I didn't see that it was fair that what would be considered a rezone would have to pay, and then somebody that is a spot zone and doesn't like the fact that we're gonna tell them like it may not pass because it's considered a spot zone, and Texas state law states that here's the criteria, you do not meet that criteria, and it's gonna most likely be shot down. And then go to y'all, and then it ends up on the agenda, and then we see it the Friday before the meeting, and we're like. I guess, guess that's how it's gonna
The
go.
application, and everything would still have to go through the whole process, which is the internal procedures.
I remember when I was in planning and zoning, we had 2 cases that they passed, and that were presented to planning and zoning.
Right.
I remember.
I would say that if someone asked that of me too, and they knew it was a spot zone, I didn't even know what a spot zone was until I got on council. And then at that point in time, someone may say, I want my property over here to be commercial, it's surrounded by residential and everything else, then the due diligence is on you guys to explain what a spot zone is. But I have no problem because the ultimate yay or nay of that's gonna come from council. So before they drop $350, I have no problem with them coming to council and then getting a little explanation and us saying, well, if you're right smack dab and you want to put an industrial in the middle of a residential zone, never gonna pass. But if you're one building over or something like that, or it's in a comprehensive plan or anything else, you've got a lot more likelihood that council's gonna yay that. I just think that it's kind of on you guys or starting that conversation with us so that they have a probability of knowing if they should pursue it or not.
Okay.
I just want to point out that this was legislatively correct. I sent the amended ordinance to council for the 2 weeks as the ordinance policy stated. Yes, there was a typo on the P and Z agenda caption, but that doesn't affect the legality of it. It was correct in the packet, which, like you said, I did amend for the first and second readings on August 6th and 19th. So I just wanted to point out that, you know, the process was correct. It's a valid ordinance.
Right.
If you didn't want to change it, we should start the whole process.
Per the SOP for ordinances. What
It's
it
not
was,
approved yet. Yeah.
sure, but this is what's getting looked at, right? So this should be ideally the process that it should follow.
Moving forward, yes.
Okay, so then according to this, when Councilmember Stevens approved for or moved to have it amended. And it was approved or seconded and then approved, it should have went to being amended and then to second reading and not to a new ordinance. That was altered
So it got sent back to the city manager.
to be
to be-
amended.
To then go to planning and zoning, which changed the ordinance, and it was a substantive change. At which point a new ordinance number was assigned. It was a different ordinance.
Mhm.
The initial one was basically removing the ability for planning and zoning in the city council to spot zone. And the second one was presented again, like I said, still providing the
Mhm.
ability to do it within the exceptions.
Mhm. So then this is where like my concern is, majorly. Is that I don't think it's okay for me to vote in a representative. And then for his vote to almost not matter when somebody else can be like, well. We won't take it to a second reading from what we've all just clarified should have been there. And then it goes to a different ordinance. To something else that was not properly passed. So you can't tell me that the legislative process based off of this first one was followed correctly all the way through. Because what they voted on did not end up in this.
Actually, it did, because they reviewed it, it was presented in the packets, and again. I mean, I can confirm it was legislatively correct. I did ask the mayor if she wanted me to consult the attorney, and she said no. But it was, so we can agree to disagree right now, and we can
That's
send it
fine.
to the attorney if you'd like,
Okay.
or the council would like, but it was legislatively correct. It's a valid ordinance.
Right, and I'm not stating that it's not. What I'm stating is that it should have been to a second reading exactly the way they passed it to be.
It doesn't affect the validity of this ordinance.
Right, and it doesn't because it was passed, but what I was getting at is that. What they initially voted on never got brought back to them.
It came and it changed, it was in the packet, they reviewed it, they approved it that way.
But the amendment was to just add 2 actions.
It was sent to them for 2 weeks per the ordinance policy, so they could review it if they had any feedback.
I think we're just gonna continue on.
Okay, Councilmember Stone.
Thank you, Mayor. Would you like to put a different hat on just for a second? And
Sure,
do you
what you
have
got?
I was just saying, do you have personal views on specifically what's in the ordinance? And how
No,
it
I
should
don't.
change?
I wasn't here
Okay.
when this was initiated.
Okay.
It
If
was
you'd like to
before I
be
was
a
a
private
deputy.
citizen for one
Sure.
minute, you could say
Absolutely.
specifically anything about the ordinance. Otherwise, let's Let's continue seeing if we have any other views that the council that has right now. That's my thought.
Councilmember Martinez?
I think we need to clarify the order that we're talking, that they have to go to them first and pay, you know, and then whatever it follow the next procedure, so people need to know, we need to know, so we can be in the same page.
Councilmember Nance?
I would just say that the whole thing originated because there was a problem with the process, and spot zoning and everything else, and so it's good that this whole thing has been amended and rectified, and then running that through your council person or anything else so they can start that conversation. I'm glad of it.
Councilmember Escobedo?
I thought it was already fixed. Am I correct?
Yes, I mean, this was passed or the council passed it. That's all I'll say. I mean, it was presented, it was amended. As to what we believe the council wanted, it was sent to the council for 2 weeks to review it for any feedback. It was presented in planning and zoning, that same ordinance, they passed it. Yes, there was 2 words missing in the caption, because I'm human and I accidentally didn't add with exceptions to the planning and zoning caption. But again, they approved that in the packet and then at both meetings, Megan explained to the council, if you watch the videos, this allows the council to spot zone with exceptions. I don't see what the problem is because it was passed correctly, and I think we're just, talking about technicalities and trying to take things when they shouldn't go.
Okay,
And I think it could have been addressed differently, but.
well, I think that we've talked about it enough.
Okay, Councilmember Stevens?
So, Rob, you know what our intent is, correct? Do you believe the ordinance needs to be changed?
That's up to y'all.
No, I didn't ask that. Do you understand the intent of what we've talked about? Do you
Right.
believe the ordinance needs to be changed?
Based off the 2020 or the May 21 meeting, I do.
So you understand it, but your view is it's not clear enough in the ordinance for you to be able to follow the guidelines, and potentially someone can bring something to a council member before it goes to planning and zoning.
So like if I can, like he's saying, without like taking this off, not an official capacity whatsoever at all. As a citizen, I am concerned that my representatives did not have what they passed translated properly.
I'm setting aside the procedural side.
Right.
That's,
And so that's why I'm saying, no, based off of the May 21 meeting, I do not believe it got put into the ordinance properly. Because even the agenda that he's stating that he missed 2 words on states that it's still taking the provision that enables y'all to initiate a spot zone away.
I got it. So I've got no more questions.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so where do we go from here?
It's
Well, I
a
would-
probation discussion item.
I honestly, I think it leads into the next item of discussion. Initiate is an application. Applications have to go through building services.
Okay,
And so that's a standard operating procedure or an internal procedure, an administrative directive.
So what would be the corrections to modify writing properly, which is legally that?
I
in
don't
the
think-
ordinance?
I don't think
Don't you
the
want?
ordinance needs to necessarily change. We need to have the administrative directive or the standard operating procedure that outlines this is the steps.
And you get our intent already, right? I mean, when we move on to the next agenda item, we say this one more time, you get what we're trying to say. He
all goes through him
understands,
first.
he'll understand that
Or her.
what we need to do, and I'm sorry that you're feeling, a little bit like there was an error, but hopefully we can make it to where we Megan's gonna be like, this is what we do, and you know what needs to be done, and then it
Yeah,
can be
I
done.
don't wanna like
Yeah.
hyper focus on this one ordinance,
Yeah.
because it's like. If this was done this way, is it in question that maybe other ones have been done this way?
I'm guaranteeing a lot of bad things have been done in this council, not by this council, but by tons
Sure,
before
yeah.
us. It's been a mess,
Yeah.
So, I honestly understand that, this is like getting you a little bit, but at the same time, the whole point is to clean up the ordinances, help you do what you want to do. And honestly, we need your feedback. Like, you're probably our best building inspector, manager, operator that the city's had in a long time. So we value you a lot. That's what I want to say, first of all. also, Gio, we value and know that you do a ton as well. But we want to make this clear and we want to help you out, like seriously.
And I know
Yeah.
you're doing this because you care about the
right.
community.
The only last thing I would mention is just having more eyeballs on it, because I know on our cover pages, they get approved through 3 or 4 people. I think Alex does some of them, Gio, Megan, so this is not a bad thing. Hold us accountable for it, and then we come back and now we know we're double checking our crossing our T's and dotting our I's. But more eyes is good.
Well, and Gio did say that if we needed to consult with the attorney, we can do to see if there's anything, but I think we all got it.
Thank you for your input, so keep us straight.
Mhm. Okay, anything else? Okay, all right, thank you, Rob. Thank you, Jessica. All right, so moving on to the next discussion item, city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things I wanted to bring to the city council's attention is I have been internally working with directors, and even within my own office to create standard operating procedures and administrative directives. I look at council's resolutions and ordinances as a high-level overview of the direction you want the city to go. And then we go in and we actually put the procedural part in either a standard operating procedure or into a administrative directive. I know that Gio has already started working on and completed the operating procedures for resolutions and for ordinances, and there's an ordinance template. This was done as part of some of the conversations with council, because it's like, hey, you know, we passed this ordinance, prime example, what we just discussed, and well, how are we gonna actually move forward and implement it? So part of my job as city manager is the implementation side, which is why I've asked all of the departments to start working on these SOPs so that we can have some internal procedures, but also everyone can be on the same page. Like I said, I only included a few. We've been working on actual multiples. The other one I have included is the vehicle use. There is a standing city employees get a vehicle. But we don't have that outlined with, okay, you get a city vehicle, but these are the do's and don'ts of it. And then to have them acknowledge that, hey, I get a city vehicle, but these are some of the restrictions that come with it. One of the big things with the city vehicle, of course, is the unauthorized personnel. I love our little team in our community, but I don't think it's appropriate for you to drive your children to school in a city vehicle. There are liabilities with that as well. So it's just breaking down, it's just a draft version right now, regulating that. We're also looking at the fuel card. We do provide our employees with fuel cards to utilize for city vehicles, not for personal use on city trips. So kind of outline some of those rules and regulations. The street department is working on standard operating procedures within their department on some of their day-to-day activities. And, you know, for example, 360s, walking around a vehicle, and how do you make sure your heavy equipment is operational before you jump in and start using it? The gas department already does require by Railroad Commission, so they have a operations manual, O&M that they utilize that is regulated by the Railroad Commission, that they do keep updated. The utility department does have a few of them in place currently. I know that under Andrew Devaney, when he was here assisting, they put in some for the lift stations and making sure how do you check them and how do you do your what we call R&R, which is your reads for your different wells and making sure that those are regulated. They put those in place. I have asked building services also to start working on SOPs, especially because they have the whole permit side and understanding the permit process. And then that also helps when we hire new people as well, so that when someone comes in that they have that training. But also when citizens complain with any of the departments, okay, well, this is our procedures. This is how we, you know, this is the steps. We have a one online right now for like utility billing where my meter reads are too high. And you know, that's a very small SOP. Well, you know, step 1, we do a reread. Step 2, we do a meter test. Step 3, those are all what we consider SOPs, which are standard operating procedures. The administrative directives are more to provide additional clarification and do's and don'ts within things that council's already passed. So I wanted to go ahead and start getting these before you, so that you can see what we're working on. I think it's important that each of the departments have them, So that one, if there is a question or there's turnover, someone can come and go, okay, this is what they do their day-to-days. This is their operating procedures. We have other policies that tie to these, especially like if you look at cash handling. So, you know, someone who takes money has to make sure that not only do they follow their internal process, you know, completing out the applications and the forms, but then making sure they follow that cash handling as well. And how do they do the deposit and who does it go to? So we're really working hard on cleaning up the internal procedures. I am not going to sit down and do the one for the departments because obviously I don't know their day-to-day operations, which is why I've asked the different departments to do them. Chief just recently had his policy manual updated by Lexipol, a third-party organization that provides the specifics with law enforcement, slightly different. They have, you know, the body cameras, they have license plate readers, they have use of force, they have, you know, all the other things that have to be considered, that he's also worked on and got updated. But I'm just getting this information before you so that you can start seeing all of the things that are starting to develop within the office of the city manager of each of the departments.
Okay, so the standard operating procedures, do they come to council for approval or is it just through you?
They'll come to me for approval.
Okay,
Those are internal procedures.
okay. And so for Rob and Jessica's, their question, so that council doesn't just put something on the agenda, where is the stop with that? So let's say 2 years from now, there's a whole new council sitting up here. And they decide, somebody comes to them and wants a spot zone. And they decide to push it forth without going to Rob and Jessica. Where does that, how does that stop?
So it would honestly stop with the city manager and the city secretary because
It wouldn't go on the agenda.
we would inform them that these are the procedures. We're all on the same page. That, hey, this can't go on the, or can't go on the agenda. These are the procedures. If the council member, you know, we are supervisors. If the council member is adamant, then the backup documentation would include those standard procedures for everyone to see. This is the process. This item was put on the agenda, but it didn't follow the procedures.
All right, Councilmember Stone?
Yeah, it sounds like, you know, especially in this case, anything can happen. You change the ordinance in 2 years too. I mean, all these things can happen. Can we add, I see you have a few here that you're starting to be like, you know, obviously, the vehicle, a few others are important. Can we put the building standards, that operating procedure into play, as you're doing this as well?
Yeah, I can bring drafts to you on occasion.
Yeah.
We're just trying to get them implemented
Yeah,
and get
yeah.
them started. Because you guys have provided that basically that legislative, that high overview.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, my responsibility to make sure it's implemented. And that means working with the departments to get those SOPs in place. So that when we have, hey, how does this work? Or, hey, this hasn't been, you know, what's the next step?
Yeah.
Because we put in the planning and zoning, correct me, Gio, the calendar, when you submit applications for certain permits and zoning changes and replats. We put that structure in place, one, so that we can meet the state deadlines.
Yeah.
But two, everyone can see this is the steps. I submit my application, this day it's gonna go to planning and zoning, this day it's gonna go to council.
Yep.
It's the same way with these. And like I said, I've asked all the departments to work on them so that if any given day someone is not here or someone, you know, resigns, the next person coming in can say, okay, hey, these are my procedures. This is typically what I would do in this instance.
Perfect. And two last quick comments, as far as this building and standards and just in general, this is council in a way giving up, not necessarily power, but delegating in some way. And that's really what we're supposed to do here. And so I totally agree with you. And if we want to get more in your business, we're going to come meet with you and be like, what's going on here? Trust me, I'm sure we all have one or two things on our mind where we're like, you know, this trash can needs to be moved or whatever the heck it needs to be. You know, so that's just really where it sounds like is that we're going to delegate this to you and, you know, move forward with it. And I hope that we can make some peace here as well with some of these because we want to make sure the intent is correct. And that's really where it is we say what we think and then we just move on with it, you know, in that way. So that's all I got.
Okay,
Thanks.
Councilmember Stevens?
So I'm supportive of what you're talking about here, Megan, but there is one area that I think is missing. And since two of the SOPs apply to council, relative to resolutions, I believe there needs to be a statement about fiscal impact. on resolutions, and it's not anywhere in this discussion, and the same thing on ordinances. Because we have responsibility for not only what we're doing, but the fiscal responsibility to cover the costs associated. So those are my comments.
Councilmember Escobedo,
I don't have any.
Councilmember Martinez.
I have a question, who supervise or be sure that when they put an agenda in the planning and zoning, they already went and asked the permit to them? So who checked that?
So the agenda items are set up by the planning and zoning chair and the committee as well as building services.
So they have to check with them, because like when I was there, like I said, we have 2 cases that they didn't go through them and they put it in the agenda. So who will be sure that they know what is,
So that would actually no longer take place because step 1, the internal process is the application can't just go to planning and zoning. It has to go to building services first. So everything still runs through, whereas before, you're right, it didn't. And that's where this whole conversation had started earlier
yeah,
this year.
who is sure to be sure that is the right position that when the first day before putting in the planning and zoning?
So the application moving forward automatically goes to building services, so they're gonna be aware of it. So even if it does end up on an agenda, they've already seen the application and either approved or denied it.
Councilmember Nance.
Yeah, the one thing I was gonna mention on this is that it's, I had a, citizen ask me, you know, about a pothole on their road and, to check. And all these requests, I just forward back over to the city, like, talk to the roads department, talk to buildings department, you know, like, as a council person, we're an expert at nothing. We're just trying to provide proper policy and direction for the city. So the way I see it is, if you have a problem within the city, go talk to the city first. They're the experts and they're the ones that are paid to resolve your problem. If that doesn't happen, we'll put it on the agenda. And then that, as a council person, that's our power, is to get issues put on the agenda so they can be discussed. The second thing I was just gonna say is, reading these standard operating procedures, great job, Megan, Gio, and your team, and putting all this together.
Thank you. I put the resolution and the ordinance, SOP together based on the council's task to me for my last evaluation. And I did just want to point out that it does say once an ordinance is approved at a first reading, a second and final reading may be scheduled. If it's sent back to P and Z, it wasn't approved, so throw that up.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Anything else? All right, moving on to discussion item E, city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Evergreen, Kelly, can you hear us? Are you still there? I know it's gone late.
I'm here.
So Kelly is with Evergreen. Council was provided a draft of the compensation study on October 21st. Because it is in draft form, I did not include it within the packet. But I did provide kind of a summary of the project and things that had been accomplished and kind of the steps we went through. As of this morning, Kelly, because every day it's changing, so the presentation slightly changes every day. Included in the slideshow that I will share with you is Kelly's presentation, and she's gonna walk you through kind of the whole project and where we're at now. Give me 1 second, Kelly, and I'll share my screen.
Okay.
And then just tell me when you want me to change slides.
Okay. All right, you can, my name, like she said, my name is Kelly Bradshaw. I'm here with Evergreen. If you'll go to the next slide, that's going to give us an overview of what we're going to talk about today. And so basically what we're really doing here is just we're going to go over what the study goals were, the project phases. I'm going to tell you what we learned in the employee meetings, what we found when we assessed your current systems, market results, and then our recommendations, and then finishing up with our final steps. So on the next slide, it's going to show you exactly what those study goals were. Is we wanted to look at your current compensation system. One of the things that we want to make sure is that there is an internal alignment. And really what that means is people are moving through based on their tenure or based on their rank, and it kind of just avoids that compression, that internal compression. We wanted to look at external alignment. What are your market peers paying? And how competitive is Alpine? You know, one thing that I kept hearing is that you guys are the premier city in the area, and so you want to have the premier employees as well. And then all of that information was put together to produce recommendations. The next slide's pretty quick. It's just showing you the overall phases of each project and how we broke everything off. In phase one, we had that kickoff. We met with Megan. She gave us a ton of information just about the history of Alpine. She provided so much data for us. We did that internal analysis, the external analysis, and now we're here at that implementation and reporting option. The next slide's going to tell us the positives that came out of the meeting. First of all, I think I'm pretty sure I met with almost every single one of your employees. I think there were a few that might have been on leave, but we had a great turnout, and they were so thankful for the benefits that the city offered. Just knowing that they could count on regular cost of living adjustments. They loved the community. They were proud to serve there. And they were very complimentary of the communication that came down from senior leaders. That was great. Now, they had a few things that they wanted, I'm going to say request, because there wasn't something that it wasn't a big like, oh, we have to have this or else. I didn't get any of that from your employees. But they were interested in ways to increase their take-home pay. And they talked about things like bilingual pay, on-call pay, merit-based increases that would come from performance evaluations and the ability to sell back sick leave. One of the things that kept popping up was the cost of living within Alpine, being the premier city in the area. It's just the cost of housing and childcare, and if there was any way that the city could help offset that. And what was really nice to hear, and it's something that we don't hear a lot, is your employees said, hey, I want to promote, but I need to know how. Can we create some sort of succession planning? And that speaks very highly of the quality of employees that you have there. So when we did our AOC analysis, it was a little bit trickier for you guys, simply because you guys didn't have an established pay grade. And that's not unusual in small cities, and it's definitely not unusual in the area that you guys live in. And I'll talk a little bit about that more in the market study. But we definitely wanted to review movement by tenure, and we wanted to compare pay by rank. And so what we found was that the majority of your employees are paid more than their projected salary based on a 30-year progression. And so that's kind of a funny thing to say when I just said, hey, you don't have a pay scale. And so what I did when I was establishing that pay scale, so I would have something to do an analysis, I looked at your positions, and whoever was the lowest paid person in a like set of classifications became the minimum of the pay grade, and then whoever was the highest paid person became the maximum of that made up pay grade. And what that told me is you guys are really moving people along nicely. And then we looked at compression, because that's something that hits a lot of municipalities. And what we found is the majority of your employees are paid less than 80% of their supervisor's salary. And that is great. You guys have really done a good job setting this up when you had no baseline. So kudos. Now, one of the things that we definitely wanted to look at tenure, and of course, tenure changes every day, right? But this was as of 10/7/2024. And what this tells us is you have a very young city government. I shouldn't say city government, the tenure of your employees. You can see, in administration, average tenure is 3.1. Gas, airport, public works, they're pretty high up there, which is great. But really, airport is the only one that has more than 17.9 years, or more than 15 years of experience at 17.9. And the reason that that is important is when we're looking at where somebody should fall within that pay grade, typically somebody would be, with the city for 30 years, and at 15 years, you would say that, hey, they're at the midpoint. And so if I just looked at these numbers without looking at that data, I would say, oh, these people are going to be down at the very minimum of their pay grade, which is not what we found. And so I just wanted to point that out to you guys. Now, on the next slide, we're going to talk about the market targets. And so we went out to 20 people, 20 groups, and we were able to collect data from 11 of those. 24 of the 47 positions surveyed have sufficient responses. which might not seem like a lot, but like you guys, some of these smaller cities just had very broad pay ranges. You know, if they're in an administrative role, they're gonna make X. If they're in a any sort of physical labor, they're gonna make Y. So it did make matching that data a little bit different. And then you're gonna see that cost of living index on there. And so what that means is whenever we received information, we adjusted that cost. So it reflected how far a dollar would go in Alpine. So Argyle, a little bit more expensive. So their numbers would have gone down from what they gave us, you know, early, a little bit cheaper, their numbers would have gone up because just how that, that cost of living index works. So because you guys didn't have that, you know, that true established salary, what we wanted to look at is how did you compare if we looked at your average actual salaries and then compare that to the midpoint of the range, and you were only 8.6% off the midpoint of the range. But like we showed on that other side, you guys have a really young staff. So really that's about what we would expect. And then we looked at departments and how far the departments though themselves were behind market. And so the 4 that were behind market, more than 10%, Public Works, sworn police officer, building services, and then non-sworn police officers. And so that's going to show you there just how far behind market they were when you compared the midpoint of the market to where your average actuals are. So we used all of this information, and the first thing we wanted to do is create a pay scale. And what this is going to do is it's going to help you assign classifications to the specific pay grade. And so right now we have 15 pay grades. We have something for every single one of your employees, with the exception of city manager. And simply because at that level, typically you're not going to see them in a pay grade. You have to be much more flexible with the market at that position. But right now we have you guys set up. And I do want to point out that when we talk about these costs, this is going to be reflected of base salaries only. So if you have somebody who gets some sort of supplemental, which you guys do have some people getting supplemental pay, that would be on top of their base pay. So the big question for you guys is going to be on that next slide. What does this cost? And so this is the projected salary the projected increase. And we looked at a hybrid parity. And so what that does is says, if I've been with the city for 10 years, but I've been in my classification for 5 years, I'm going to get 5 full years of credit for my time in classification. And then I'm going to get partial credit for that other time that I've worked with the city to just reward me for my loyalty and my knowledge of the city that I bring. And one thing that Megan already explained to you guys is sometimes these total salary costs can change. And the reason that they change is because we put in the solution, something called, implementation date. And so right now we have that implementation date as 11/24. But let's say for some reason you guys decided to implement on 1/1. Of course, that's going to change the tenure. That's going to change those dates. But right now, this is about what we're looking for. If we did the hybrid method, you're going to see it's a little over 200,000. 47 employees will be adjusted with an average adjustment of $4,378.53, which is about 5.9% of your total payroll.
My name is Susan. I'm calling on behalf of Aetna, your insurance provider.
I'm sorry, is somebody asking me a question?
No, just keep
Okay.
going, please.
Keep
Okay,
going.
sorry about that. And again, this is a payroll. So this doesn't include those additional costs that you may accrue, like taxes, workers' comp, things like that. And this is just kind of an example. When we go over that hybrid parity, it's confusing. I'm not going to lie to you guys. It is a little confusing. And so being a visual person, I have to create for myself something. And so I always created this for myself. And I finally said, why don't I share this with my clients? And so what you have here, employee A, employee B, both have a starting salary of $32,760, which I believe is pay grade 102. Both have 15 years with the city. However, employee A was promoted 5 years ago. And so employee A's salary would be, $40,000. And you'll see on there, there's that movement from the classification, and then there's also room to move. I'm sorry, employee B was promoted 5 years ago. Employee B, you'll see that they have movement from just their classification and then movement from their time within the organization and then room to grow. So their salary would be $38,200. And sometimes we have questions like, well, they've both been here for 15 years. Why is it a little different? Well, one of the reasons we do it at pay grade 102, just start that off, that example, is that means that employee A has been there the whole time in that pay grade for the whole 15 years. So you would expect them to be better at that classification than employee B, who's only been there 5 years in that classification. And they did get a promotion. So it's going to be a little bit lower, but it's going to address both of theirs time in class and then also their time with the city. One of the things that Megan and I really wanted to do on the next slide is we wanted to look at this and do the same analysis that we did in the beginning to say, hey, what does this change? How is this going to better Alpine and create a good baseline? Well, you're going to have less people at the minimum and maximum of the range, which we know because we kind of had to create those numbers to begin with. But it does create a solid baseline for you when you're hiring and moving people through. It's going to show you exactly where they need to be. And you've got those established skills for hiring and promoting, which is very beneficial. I don't know if any of you guys have looked for jobs ever in your life, I would assume. But most of us want to go, hey, what does this job pay before we fill it out, before we fill out this application, before we apply? And it's going to create that transparency for you. And then when your employees are here, they know exactly how far they can move up. They know exactly what their options are. And then when you guys, if you guys are also able to implement that succession planning, you can tie those two things together, and that's going to be great for y'all. The next steps, the first part is for you guys to choose an implementation option and communicate that decision with employees. Once that is done, I have shared with Megan, we have a mail merge document that we're more than happy to put together and share with employees so they know exactly what their new pay scale is going to be, what their new salary is going to be. We've already provided new job descriptions based on information that have been was supplied by the employees, but we do provide 1 year ongoing support. So if there's any questions, feel free to reach out to me or anybody on my team, and we are here to support Alpine. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Hey, Councilmember Nance.
Got a couple questions, Kelly. So looking at that, what would be the new baseline minimum wage?
The new baseline minimum wage is $15 an hour. So that is that $31,200.
31,200?
Yep.
Okay. And then this may be a question for you or Megan. What supplemental pay do we currently have?
Kelly, I can.
Okay.
Somebody has two computers open or something.
Okay, sorry, it was me. I don't know how I got off mute. So the city council in 2020 approved the employee handbook that listed specific classifications. Currently, those are for law enforcement based on the different types of certifications that they get, anywhere from advanced peace officer, intermediate peace officer. It's also for telecommunications operators. There's the advanced, intermediate, beginner. There is a differential pay for code enforcement, and there is one for the court clerk as well. The utilities, it's not a differential, it's an hourly increase of $1 for their D, C, B, and A license. There's also, if an employee has a CDL, they get that increase as well. But then they also have to keep the CDL. So if they don't keep the CDL and they give it back,
Let it lapse.
Thank you, let it lapse, then they lose that certification pay.
Okay. And so we currently do not have pay grades, but this would be moving us into pay grades.
Yes.
Also on that hybrid plan and the 200,000 or whatever, would that be mostly moved? The positions in the departments you said are lowest were sworn police officers, non-sworn building services, and one other. Is
Works.
Public Works, is the majority of that going to actually go towards those, or what does that look like?
So I can pull up the solution real quick and pull that up and let you know. I will go ahead and say I won't talk specific people because I just don't think that's fair for people in a public setting. So the majority of that is going to be to cover the police. Utilities would be in order, police would be the most expensive, followed by Public Works, followed by utilities. Yes, sir. So that would cover all of those departments. The only departments that it looks like are not set to get an increase on that would be municipal courts and building services.
Building services.
That was one of our lowest though, right?
That was, and I can pull that up and give you the reason why.
Or whichever way you're looking at it, it was 15% off, I think.
So right now you have two very new people in building services, and they were already brought in above the new minimum.
Gotcha.
So when we did that, that view of the assessment of current conditions, that would have been based on whoever were in those positions. It looks like one was promoted in on August and one back in April. So that's why that number is different for them.
And then the final comment I had is, you said that we have low tenure, but not a low cost of employee. Do you think that we just have a high labor cost in the area? We have to pay more in the area to get skilled labor?
Well, I'm not going to say that's a hard question. The numbers that we're providing are very much on par. You are seeing a nationwide move to that $15 an hour, right? And so that's going to increase, but you do have, if you looked at those cost of living expenses, Alpine is more expensive. It has a higher cost of living index than the surrounding area. And you are a small town, so you have a smaller pool of people to pull from for some of these positions. And so those are things that can affect how much you have to pay to get people in. But I do want to say, I mean, you guys have done a great job. Please don't think that I'm implying anything else.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Martinez,
I don't have any questions.
Councilmember Escobedo.
I do have a question on page 6-4. I would like to see a better, a better organizational chart than what we have here. Like, I would like to see the city manager and who's under her and their titles. Because this is a little bit confusing. You have for instance, you have the tourism administrator, and then you have way down here, you have the visitor center assistant. They're not grouped how I would like to see them grouped. That
On
way I
the
would.
proposed pay grades,
No, on the titles. That way, if we're missing somebody, I would want to know why they're not there or they're deleted.
I just want to make sure you're talking about the exhibit 6.2 that says proposed pay grades by classification.
Yes, but yes, on that one, but I'm not talking about the pay rates. I'm talking about, I want to see something where it has their titles and who's underneath them.
So council still has to approve job descriptions. So we're also revamping all of our job descriptions. And then the organizational chart is actually approved by council. So council approved that back in 21. So that is on the list to be modified again.
Oh, great, yeah, because the last one I got was not acceptable.
I'm sorry, I missed that last part.
The organizational chart, that's not included. That's a council approval.
Okay.
So these are the recommended titles because they've taken all of our job descriptions and modified them slightly to, one, be consistent. You know, that's one thing we asked employees, because we have operators, technicians, service workers, to have it so that it's similar across the board. But they included all of our positions.
I thought we had, another person under Geo. Wasn't there two?
There's a records clerk. Which is, is there, and then an administrative receptionist.
And a new records clerk.
That's a new position, same time.
Yeah, so this is not an org chart. This is just a list of positions in alphabetical order. But if you would like it in an org chart manner, I can try to put something like that together for you.
How many assistant positions do you have?
For like administrative assistants.
For each
Utility,
director?
yeah, pretty much each director has one except for finance. So
So
you
Geo
have
has
one,
an assistant?
that's the receptionist.
Oh.
So that's the person who answers the calls for the whole entire city. It's under his department.
Yeah, so I actually have been working for years to try to get an assistant city secretary. I've set the expectations for my employee for 3 years in her growth plan to be deputy city secretary. And the council tasked me a few evaluations ago because I had to come back early from vacation from Las Vegas to do the packet. They tasked me to assign somebody to take my duties in my absence, and that person's Alex. She's here. For years, I've been working towards making her my assistant. We were waiting on this compensation and wage study, and it's not included. And so, I mean, I feel like I'm letting her down a lot because, I mean, that's been the expectation. We've talked about it. Everybody was on board. So I'm a little honestly surprised that it wasn't included in this.
As
As assistant city secretary, I think,
So we have assistant directors, right? Eddie has an.
yeah, so there's the police captain, there's the public works, the assistant public works director. In this new one, there's gonna be a assistant utilities director. So I'm just a little confused as to why that wasn't included in here.
Kelly?
So we only did positions that are currently approved and in the system. But if that's something that you're looking for down the road, I am more than happy to price that out and add that to the list.
I think it's just would be the way to go, especially since we've set her expectations for years in a row that she was gonna get that position. If she's expected to have the responsibility of doing my job while I'm gone, I think that she should have the title. We just got a new records clerk. We're getting them on. So she's supposed to have supervisory capabilities over that position to oversee the records program and things of that nature. So I think a good compromise would be, instead of deputy city secretary, which is usually a higher bracket, would be assistant city secretary. That way, in the growth plan that I've set for her, she can get the certification, she can be a voting member of the association, because you have to have the title city secretary, assistant city secretary, or deputy city secretary to be a voting member of the association. I just think it's appropriate.
So right now, she's considered a
Records clerk, and then the new employee
is also,
brand new coming on is gonna be the same title, so it just doesn't really make sense. Being that she has so much responsibility, and I'd like to just mention, I know Megan and I have both lost the last 3 years at least a week of vacation. I lost 46 hours on October 1st, and I'm working towards, empowering my employee to be that backup, but it's gonna be difficult, especially if they don't even have the title and, the respect, the authority that comes with the position and the title like that.
so all of our departments, we have assistant directors, right?
Most of
Even, which ones do we not? Buildings?
So utility doesn't, it's a manager.
Okay,
But
but it will.
Well, we're changing the title to fit more of what is already in place. And this is something I did discuss with you. Is step one, let's clean it up. Step two is to build upon it. So the idea is, let's take what we currently have in place and modify it and make it what it really is. And then step two, to go in and put in that growth and then the organization and what we want to change things to.
Well, here's my thing. You have an assistant to the city manager, so I think it'd be a really good compromise to do assistant city secretary in the same page.
Well, that's the executive assistant that's been in place. These
But
are
I
all
mean,
current.
again, I think it'd be a good compromise to implement, you know, assistant city secretary or assistant to the city secretary. How's that gonna change, especially if it's in the same pay grade?
I thought she was very
May,
distant, but
may I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm sorry. So I would say if we're going to assistant city secretary, she would definitely be in a higher pay grade than the records clerk. You would want that for just continuity and progression. But if we're gonna put her, if we're gonna go ahead and put her in the solution and assign her a salary at that, I would need to know what date she would effectively become the assistant city secretary, if that's what you guys would like me to do. If not, I can just slot it and then you guys can handle that later on.
And I'm just trying to bring it to attention because again, I've set these expectations for years. Everybody was on board and I just want to make sure that my employee knows that I've tried to go with what we had in stone for 3 years.
okay, so what date are we looking at?
The new year. Does that sound good?
This
Well,
year,
when are the $15 will be enacted?
When council approves the hybrid,
Oh, okay.
hopefully in the next week.
I agree with you completely that we need to have someone that can do your job because you are extremely important and you do it extremely well. And I'm actually kind of surprised. I was looking at, I know your salary a little bit and you're in the midpoint of one of yours as well. But everybody's gonna start talking about everybody's salary here as we talk about this. Point being is, we need you to stick around. But even if you were a different person or you left next week, we still need to be able to have someone fill your shoes. So let's get an assistant city secretary. How do we do that? Do you go like this, or would the manager go like this, or do we go like this?
I'm pretty uncomfortable having this conversation. I'm gonna tell you right up front. We are talking about a comprehensive plan. We're not talking about individual positions.
Sure.
Let's talk about whether we're gonna have a comprehensive plan, then let's allow the city manager to go do the homework, come back. We hire her. We should not be in the middle of selecting what employee salaries or positions are. That is not our job. The problem is, we all know everyone. And I guarantee you, people come and talk to us all the time. I want this, 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 and this. I think we're barking up the wrong tree. I thought we were talking about a comprehensive plan. Okay, and not getting into individual positions. So I've said my piece. I have a whole bunch of thoughts about this, but we're in the wrong discussion.
I feel as though this should be done during executive session at least. That's what I would say, if we're gonna get this dog into it at the moment, yeah.
Councilmember Nance?
That's the end of that. I just have one general question back towards the overall, if no one else had questions. Megan, how do you see the sustainability of this?
I think the city council is gonna have to make some big decisions moving forward, especially if directors do move their employees up and there's a growth plan. Unfortunately, that's one reason why we wanted to do this, is the growth hasn't been there. We do have employees who were worker ones for 8 years. And why were they never moved up? And, you know, they're now making maybe worker 2, worker 3 salaries. I think if everyone's on board with this, you know, the conversation will have to be, okay, this is what the pay is. How do we sustain it? Taxes, fees that we charge to residents. But at the same time, you're gonna start having those employees, one, they're gonna have a better quality of life, and 2, you're gonna start getting a different group of people applying.
And so when we look at the sustainability of this, we're talking $200,000 year one on the hybrid.
Yes.
So $200,000 on year one, but you're saying that that's probably gonna go up year over year because we're gonna be promoting people all along their
Yes.
pay grades.
Yeah.
So that number's gonna go up. And we raised property taxes 13,000, am I crazy? This year?
We raised it by 90-something thousand
Okay,
altogether.
so 90. So the only reason I say that is, like you said, this money's gonna have to come from somewhere. I really want to support the employees and everything else like that, especially at the lower level and everything else. But just the, you know, the money has to come from somewhere, whether from some part of it. And then the final thing I was gonna ask is, are any of our positions paid through grants?
Yes, 2 of them.
Okay,
But if that grant disappears, then the city does absorb those employees at full cost.
okay.
we don't predict it to disappear, but we never know.
Councilmember Stevens and then Stone.
So now I'd like to make my comments because you went on to everyone. I just kind of want
Yeah.
to stop a discussion about individual employees. But let me make my comments, please.
Okay,
There are 6 recommendations. One is to propose 15 salary grade, which I think is exactly the right thing to do. While it was pointed out that the minimum is $15 an hour, we finally moved to that. We've all been talking about that for a year and a half. The midpoint for the lowest salary grade is $18.75 an hour. In my view, there's a nice progression that finally moves us in the right direction. Second comment I'd make is Exhibit 2 on the proposed pay grades for classification. There are only 6 of the total 60 classifications are at the lowest level. That says most are going to start at above $15 an hour, which makes us competitive in the marketplace. The third is we've talked about specific positions and, recommendation number 4 says conduct a small survey as needed to assess market competitiveness for hard to fill classifications. We have that recommendation there. That's on page almost the final page. And recommendation 5 says do this every year or do this every so often, every 2 to 5 years, and then have a hiring grid. The last point I'd make is, to your point, Darren, only 25% of our total budget comes from taxes, which are property taxes and sales taxes. The majority of our 75% of our budget comes from enterprise and other items. We have plenty of money to be able to go implement this for the long term. I'm not concerned about being able to pay our employees fairly. We've got the money set aside. In past budgets, we set aside over $1 million to make sure we had this work. So I think this is exactly the right thing to do. I think we need to bring it back to the next meeting to get approval, then allow the city manager to come back and says, now that we've approved this, what's the recommendation for implementation, including how this is going to lay out? So those are my thoughts.
okay, Councilmember Stone.
Thank you, council members. Stevens, thank you, Mayor, for laying that out. Councilmember Stevens, I couldn't agree with you more that this brings some competition to us being able to do this. I do have a question for Megan and your intention, like say grade 101, we know the minimum, the 31,200. Is there a range? Is if you're hiring a new public worker, a street worker, maintenance worker, worker number 1, is that automatically that person is paid 31,200, or is there a range of experience? Or if we need somebody, could we potentially raise that closer to a midpoint upon a new hire? Is that?
Yes, it will depend
Yeah.
on what skills they can bring to the table. So
Awesome.
the 15 is, a recent high school graduate
Yep.
who graduated in May and we hired in June.
Yep.
But if someone comes in and say that they're an experienced heavy equipment operator, we're not gonna hire them as a worker 1. We would be hiring them as a worker 2 or 3, depending on what equipment they could.
Very good. That would be my thought exactly. I appreciate your thoughts there too. As I guess, second of all, is that, I think just coming back to what Gio's saying here, I think it'd be great for you to put this on an executive session, or ask one of us to do that on your behalf if you have to do that. I think that we can get into the nitty gritty of this. And I will say, take this as a compliment, please. Your office is extremely well ran and you're extremely organized. And so I know that you have a lot of expectations that might be known by the mayor or by past councils or other people. And we want to be able to honor those as the best as we can. And so bring that to us in a private setting that would probably more be, in my opinion, more appropriate for that. And I hope you take that well. I mean that with all honesty, like in a good way. Thank you, Megan, for getting this to us. Be honest, I wish it was like 6 months ago, but I do appreciate this, and this is a very good study. I'm glad to see that we are going to be paying folks what I think is closer to a fair wage, especially those young people. And I want to also say to Chief Lasoya, I know a lot of your non-sworn officers as well, or perhaps the phone scanners. And I want to make sure that we can look out for those folks. And to our building services, I think y'all were the lowest, I don't know all of your employees, but it said 15% lower than the average. So I think we ought to take police, building services, public works, and police non-sworn as quickly as possible, moving these forward. I know that we're gonna have to make kind of implementation levels, but if those are our lowest, let's get it going. And I think we can knock out some things, because when we were talking to Public Works and Streets Department, they were like, I need new people. I can't hire people. We're gonna be able to like knock two birds out with one stone, you know, that type of stuff. This is cool stuff. And this is what people wanted. We're at the end of it. We get to say we delivered on something. So congratulations to all y'all too. And that's all I got, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, and
Alex,
with
thank
that-
you for your work, Alex. Keep doing the good job.
Yes. All right, and with that, we're gonna take a 5-minute break.
Did I talk too long?
The break is over. Moving on to action items. Action item A belongs to the city manager.
The city.
In the absence of city manager, I propose we approve plat 2024-11-01 application replat, which will allow the applicant family crisis center from the Big Bend Center to reflect the updated ownership of a recently purchased unimproved alley in the city property. The city property is located 402 East Gallego Avenue, is legally described as lots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and the alley, block 71 of the original of Alpine. The property owner of record is Family Crisis Center for the Big Bend Incorporated. The parcel of the sub-property is 12236. The current zoning classification of properties are two-family district. If the replat is approved, the zoning classification of property R2, two-family district.
I need a motion.
I made the motion.
I need a second. All right, discussion, city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize. I was taking some medication.
No worries.
So this is in line with the sale of the property the city owns. This is the last step in making sure that the alley is completely removed on the plat itself, so that they show that they have full ownership of that property. They did follow all of the process and procedures, and it's ready for approval.
All right, discussion,
Oh, and I'm sorry, planning and zoning did approve.
okay, discussion.
I'm in the Family Crisis Center board, so we've been waiting for this approval, so I agree.
Discussion.
And one question I had, this is R2, it's not commercial?
No.
I guess that's the only question I had.
Discussion.
I thought it was commercial too. That kind of, I read it a few times and it still threw me off. I was not with it, understanding that. So was this city property?
No.
No.
It was owned by a,
Somebody else.
yes.
So I
receiving.
I'm sorry, and are they, so did they pay for the alley or?
Yes, they purchased the alley.
Well, the alley,
Okay, thank you. for
All right, let's
telling me.
vote.
I actually had one more question, sorry. Then, just to verify under zoning, then this can happen under our residential, right? Like what's gonna be run there?
Yes.
Because
Okay,
it's housing.
It's a nonprofit.
it's housing, okay. Just wanted to make sure, cross our Ts.
Yeah, very good.
So, but most schools are R1.
Oh, okay.
In the spot zoning, it's public benefit in my thought. And that's allowed as well in residential, so, yeah. I vote aye.
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 City Secretary, action item 2024-11-01 was approved unanimously by council. Moving on to action item B, City Manager.
Approved special use permit 2024-11-01, an application for special use permit to allow the applicant Benjamin Garcia as a tenant through an existing license or permit, Brews and Hughes, BG, wine and malt beverage retailers permit to provide beer and wine sales at the subject property for a newly established business, Viva Cow Dog and Cafe. The subject property is located at 215 East Holland Avenue. The property owner of record is Jason Sullivan. The parcel ID of the subject property is 11798.
Need a motion?
Make a motion to approve. This, shoot, not at the top, I'm sorry.
Special use
Approve special use permit, for alcohol 2024-11-01.
Okay, I need a second.
Second.
All right, discussion, City Manager.
Mr. Garcia has applied for a beer and wine permit to sell, where Cow Dog, that facility right there. He did go through the proper process and P and Z did approve.
Okay, discussion.
No.
Council Stevens.
So I just have a question. So he's taking over Cow Dog. Is that what's going on? I'm just curious. Well, I'm gonna ask the questions.
He's partnering to sell the alcohol.
Okay, thank you.
Question that cow dogs and cafe, they have inside bathrooms, right?
On the cafe part, yes. The-
And you said they have previously licensed permit?
So the original, is it Jacob?
They had a permit before?
So basically Benjamin Garcia operates Brews and Hughes right next to Alco Social, and this
Mhm.
would be getting like a subsidiary license under that license. But they still require our signature.
Okay.
Let's vote.
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
City Secretary, special use permit 2024-11-01 was approved unanimously. Moving on to action item C, City Manager.
Approved variance 2024-11-01, an application for a variance which would allow the applicant Yifeng Li and Zidong Lin, care of Carol Morrow, to establish a variance to the setback requirements of the subject property. The acceptable setback is typically 12.5 feet from the structure and the property line. This variance would allow the subject property 0 feet of setback from the structure to the property line, which typically does not meet the requirements for a residential corner under the city's code. The subject property is located at 513 North 16th Street and is legally described as Lot 7 and 8, Block 8, Hamilton addition to Alpine, as shown on the subdivision plat files in envelope B6 and B7, plat records of Brewster County, Texas. The property owner of record is Ni Lin Feng and Zidong Lin. The parcel ID of the subject property is 10625. The current zoning classification of the property is R2 two-family district. If the variance is approved, the zoning classification of the subject property will be R2 two-family district.
Need a motion?
So moved.
I need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, discussion, City Manager.
This is the last piece to the sale of the property. They did purchase that little bit of right of way in order to be able to sell the property with a clean title. This is the next step, the variance that allows them to be outside of our current regulations on where the property sits. It did go before planning and zoning did approve.
Okay, discussion, Councilmember Escobedo.
I don't have anything right now.
Okay, discussion, Councilmember Martinez.
I have a question for Robert. Did this go through the codes and and it goes all through the, I mean, is everything is fine with the codes?
I mean,
This permit that,
You can come on up, Robert, just so it's on camera.
so I mean, as soon as y'all approve the variance, then it will be, but like right now, it's non-conforming. And so you approve the variance, it's now conforming, it's making an exception for their situation.
they went with you first and then to the planning and zoning.
I'm sorry,
Do they need your approval to buy this?
No,
this
so,
does not need my approval, it needs y'all's.
Okay.
so we approved the sale of the land because the house was illegally on city property.
I know that.
In order to make this happen, then we had to go back and say, okay, let's get approval for a permanent variance. Otherwise, they don't comply with the city. They can't sell the house. Their only choice is to tear down the house.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Councilmember Stowe, Councilmember Nance.
No comment.
Councilmember Steve. All right, let's vote.
Aye.
Aye.
City Secretary, variance 2024-11-01 was approved unanimously. Moving on to action item D, Councilmember Nance.
Okay, I'd make a motion to approve moving forward with bike lane on Avenue B from North Harrison Street to North Hancock Drive.
Okay, Councilmember Nance made a motion. I need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, discussion, Councilmember Nance.
Perfect. So, went over there and spoke with Eddie and Raul, and that street is about 32 feet wide. And they were just looking at it to see if we could do a kind of a temporary bike lane or something like that, see if that would work. They, I think, recommended about a 6-foot lane, but that will be upon their judgment. It could be smaller, a little bigger. And just kind of, we just wanted to make sure everything was safe. Last thing I was going to say is they talked about striping it, putting up some cones or protected barriers along it to kind of let people know that that was a temporary bike lane and possibly some reflectors. So I just wanted to thank Raul and Eddie for meeting and kind of around the input on that.
Great. Councilmember Stevens.
So the only question I have is, one, I think it's a great experiment, so I'm all in favor of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand on the north side of where it goes on the grass and there's the arrows. What happens there?
We did look at that and they said that they may have to come in and scrape that out a little bit.
So that I'd scrape that out.
There's a curbing there, but that has kind of grown into it.
Yep. And what about the sidewalk here? That's what I'm trying to understand.
I think once again, that's the kind of an encroachment along that. So that road should be about 32 feet wide.
Yep.
Oh, that could be 30 at that point. So
Okay.
that's why I really wanted to just lean on them. If that's not an 8-foot lane on 32 feet, I think not 100% sure. The minimum has to be like 11 to 12 feet.
Okay.
So let's just say 12 feet for each lane, 24. Then we're looking at about 8 feet for a bike lane. in a perfect world. We're not in a perfect world right there.
Right.
So they may have to shrink that 8 foot down to 6 or 5 or something
Okay.
else.
Okay, so the only other comment I'd make is, given we approve this, do you know Ben Talaska?
I know, sir.
So I spent a lot of time at the university. Ben Talaska is responsible for all facilities. So if we approve this, I'll go talk to Ben and share with him the plan. So he says he gets it and understands it. Talk with Bob Jacobs, who's the facility director reporting to Ben.
And that's with Soros.
That's what Soros. Yeah,
Thank
it's all gonna work out. Okay,
Great.
that's all I have. Thanks.
Councilmember Stone?
Yeah, as you're talking about the plan, something that might be interesting to look at is whether it's City of Austin or some other city that does bike lanes regularly. I know this green striping in front of like where cars would be pulling out of the lot would be extremely helpful. Probably not, it wouldn't cost much as well, and so that could set a precedent of green striping means bike lane, or it means two modes of transportation are crossing each other into pedestrian or bikes or so forth. And so maybe just being able to put that all in favor. Actually, I went up, I've been going a couple of times a week up to Hancock Hill to do hikes. I was driving back down because I drive back to my house, but I look forward to bicycling. But I stopped and talked to a couple of people walking their dogs, and they're like in the middle of the road. And I was like, would it be interesting if we had a place where you could walk up this hill? And they were like, yes. And so I think that this would be really neat to see and a great experiment. Thanks for bringing it up, Darren.
Councilmember Martinez?
Yes, I just have a question, related to that, how the people will know that is bike line, it would be a special line, division.
It would be a solid stripe, I believe. So those, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll have about a foot, solid stripe, and then a foot and another solid stripe to really clearly demarcate that area from where driving is occurring.
So who would do that line?
I
The
believe.
Soros,
City.
the city?
City does, you know, city property.
We're fixing to see it on Fifth Street.
No.
So
Yeah,
the state's putting in
text off.
bike lanes.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
But these are not going to be parking lanes, is that correct?
It'll be
Sorry,
protected, I
They
believe.
will not be code
Use-
use with his project.
With
The
this
state is
project.
making code use.
Yeah.
lanes.
Okay, I was just
Councilmember.
making sure that was intent on the recording.
Councilmember Escobedo?
I think it's a great idea for both, you know, the community, but also for the students. You know, a lot of them do have bikes,
So
So that is-
advantage.
oh yeah,
hopefully.
definitely.
The whoosh.
All right, let's vote.
I,
Aye.
City Secretary, we're moving forward with a bike lane on Avenue B from North Harrison Street. Unanimous vote by council. Moving on to action item E, City Manager.
Approve transferring $10,000 from the Texas Class Reserve account, fire account be provided to the Alpine Emergency Service Board for a total of $50,000 for fiscal year 2024-2025.
I need a motion. Second.
I second.
All right, discussion, City Manager.
So, as you recall at the last meeting, the board did discuss their financial situations. In addition, county judge did mention about the additional contributions. The city does have available funds to provide additional $10,000, totaling the $50,000 for this fiscal year. Currently in the budget, it is $40,000. The reason we did not increase it during the budget process was we hadn't had a financial discussion with them on where they were at with their finances. I do want to note that the next meeting, if council does approve this, there will be a first and final reading of the ordinance amending the budget to recognize the additional revenue of $10,000 and the additional expense to the Alpine Emergency Service Board of $10,000, so $50,000.
Okay. All right, discussion, Councilmember Martinez, Escobedo, Lance. Stevens, okay, let's vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, City Secretary, we have approved transferring $10,000 from the Texas Class Reserve account to the fire account to be provided to the Alpine Emergency Services Board for a total of $50,000 unanimously. All right, that ends action items. Now moving into executive reports. City Mayor report, there is none this evening. City Manager report, 6 minutes on the clock with an additional 4 possible.
Just a quick.
Oh, wait, I want to point out that since there's not a list of items that she's discussing, that per TOMA, there can be no discussion. That's per Texas Open Meetings Act.
So this really is just an update for council since we've had ongoing discussions on the items of interest. On the water side, the lead and copper, we are currently updating the errors in the data submitted. There was duplicate entries. Their online portal Swift has come back with needing to make some of these corrections. We're working on that. We're also finalizing the required notice to residents that we have 30 days to submit after we turned in our report. And then we're continuing to evaluate the west side of Alpine. On the wastewater infrastructure, the contract was executed for the clarifier and drying beds. The contractor and fabricator will be here November 12th and 13th to review the clarifier and take measurements. They're currently draining out clarifier 1 so that the contractor and the fabricator can come in and get clean estimates, measures, depths. So we are preparing for that visit. The street department is still working on updating the KSA spreadsheet. I did send out earlier their 2025 seal coat list to council. And you were provided the employee compensation presentation this evening.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so city council member comments, Councilmember Stevens,
That's motivational.
Councilmember Escobedo, Councilmember Nance, Councilmember Martinez.
I want to congratulate Megan for her nomination as a vice president of this region for TML. And I want to congratulate Alpine because they're hosting the next TML meeting. Thank you.
Councilmember Stone. Okay, and I'm good. So that brings us to item number 15, executive session. Pursuant to chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code, the city council reserves the right to convene into executive session from time to time as deemed necessary during this meeting for any posted agenda item or to receive advice from attorney as permitted by law. Tonight, the city council will recess into executive session pursuant to personnel matters 551.074 Texas Government Code for an update on filling Director of Finance and Director of Utilities positions, including actions, timelines, and hiring strategies to get key positions filled. I need a motion.
Session.
I need a second.
Second.
Discussion. Okay, let's vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
City Secretary at 7:37 PM, council voted to move into executive session.
Bye, Pepe.
Bye. Bye.
Mention Raul and Eddie or who are the.
Is the streets director?
Okay, District, yeah, Rawls' deputy.
Raul is who?
That's just see.
Okay. So they'll be on the same.
Okay, I need a motion to reconvene into open session.
Move it, reconvene at open session.
I need a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Let's vote to reconvene into open session.
Aye.
City Secretary at 8:04 PM, council unanimously voted to reconvene into open session. All right,
So Mayor, I propose that the city council ask the city manager to update the director of utility position to remove the license requirement and add the level of extensive project management skills in order to fill that role.
I need a second.
If they can.
Any discussion? Let's vote.
Aye.
Aye.
City Secretary, the motion was made to remove the licensing requirement and add extensive project management as Councilmember Stevens moved, and it passed unanimously by council. All right, and with that, we are adjourned at 8:05.
Hooray.
Wait, who won? You know, yeah, who said eight?